There is ample evidence that shows that our brains perform better when we are in a calm, positive frame of mind. But that's easier said than done, especially when you're in a difficult conversation. Let's take a look at some strategies to help you stay calm, even when the emotion is running high. Hey guys, my name's Hayden Richards. In case you're new here, this is Comms Lab. I am an emergency physician, and on this channel I share my journey and what I've learned as I strive to develop myself into an effective communicator and an emotionally intelligent leader. Sean Aker, positive psychology researcher and author of The Happiness Advantage, tells us that our brains work 31% more effectively when we are in a positive frame of mind. But maintaining that positive state can be a real challenge in difficult conversations when challenging emotions are running high. So here's 5 strategies taken from the difficult conversations literature that will give you the best chance of staying cool when the conversation is getting heated. Strategy number 1, breathe. What I find most helpful is to breathe in slowly through my nose and completely fill my lungs, and then to exhale slowly, also through my nose, counting slowly to 8 as I do so. Part of the reason this is effective is that it actually has a physiological effect on the body by down-regulating the part of the nervous system which is responsible for the fight or flight response. But the other reason why it's so effective is that it also buys you time for your brain to process the situation as it's evolved in front of you and arrive at the most effective response. Strategy number 2, take a break. Sometimes a breath just isn't enough. In this case, you might actually be better off suggesting a short break from the conversation.
Is it okay if we take a 5-minute break? I'm just starting to feel a little bit tense and I don't want to say anything that might jeopardise the conversation or our relationship.
You can use the break to move your body, change the environment, get outside if you can, and recalibrate your expectations. There's more on how to do this in points 4 and 5. Strategy number 3, end the conversation. If steps 1 or 2 don't do the trick, then you might actually need to consider ending the conversation completely. This decision really depends on your goals and your priorities for the conversation, as well as the timeframes available in which to achieve these goals. If, for example, your first priority is to preserve the relationship, or you're willing to forego some material outcome now in the knowledge that you can return to the conversation at a future date, then walking away might actually make sense before things get too heated. If, on the other hand, the material outcome you're after is actually a non-negotiable, and you don't have the leverage to enforce it right now, unilaterally, you might actually have no option of walking away. That's why preventing yourself from getting emotionally heightened in the first place is actually a far better option. But how do you do that? Strategy number 4, anticipate the mismatch. One of the most potent sources of heightened negative emotion is, quite simply, the unpleasant surprise. It's a very human thing to do, to react badly when we go into an interaction expecting one thing only to be met with something else. The way around this is to anticipate difficulty, specifically to anticipate that almost every difficult conversation will start with a mismatch in our understanding of the problem, and therefore a mismatch in our expectations for what should happen next. I visualize this as 2 lines that start far apart. That's always the starting point. My goal then is to gradually bring that mismatch into alignment as the conversation progresses. Strategy number 5, anticipate distress expressed as an attack. The other thing that is a really potent source of emotion during any difficult conversation is the sense that you're being personally attacked. And again, the key to staying calm in this situation is actually anticipating that it will happen. The fact is that when the average person comes into an interaction where they're anticipating disagreement, they're actually expecting that they'll have to defend themselves. And when someone comes into this conversation feeling that something important to them is actually under threat, that they're going to have to defend themselves, it's a natural response to go on the offensive. So I try to remember that most of these attacks are actually the result of fear or grief. And if I can remember that, and I can actually anticipate that that fear or grief is likely to manifest as aggression or as an attack, then it's far less likely to throw me off balance when that attack shows up. And I'll be able to respond to it much more effectively.
Guys, I just did want to add a little caveat here because I actually think that there is a role and a place for actually showing emotion, expressing emotion within the context of difficult conversations. Now, it's not going to suit every goal, every priority for the conversation, but there are certain conversations, including, for example, one that I had to have recently, where it actually seemed appropriate that I showed some frustration and some confusion, and even showed that I was a bit upset about the situation and hurt. And I think, depending on the goal or the priority of the conversation or the interaction, that might be entirely appropriate and very effective. I do think that, like, if you get to the point where you're overwhelmed by that emotion, whatever it is, that then you probably lose the benefit of expressing it in that way. But there is a mid-ground to be found. Anyway, I just thought I'd mention that.
Okay, so now that you managed your own emotions, the question becomes, what do you do with the other person's emotions? And that's what we're going to talk about in the next video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you there.